Here's a brief overview of my workflow when working with Reallusion in Blender to make character animations. Here I'm rotating the raw scan model before importing to Character Creator just in case. I don't think you have to do this, but I wanted to be sure that my finished head is somewhat straight when it comes back here to Blender. Now we import the scan model and use Headshot V2 to start the wrapping process. I use the low poly version of the scan in this case because I don't use a brush at the moment, which means I can't open the ZTL file that ships with texturing.xyz. If you're in the same boat as me, don't worry. The normal map that comes with texturing.xyz is pretty good, so we can use that. Only downside is that we have to do the wrapping process twice. That's why it's crucial that we save the wrapping points, so the wrapping will be exactly the same for the albedo and the normal map. Reallusion have a good tutorial on this on their YouTube channel where they show you step by step. I know this is going a little too fast. I also didn't record the second wrap because it's the exact same process. The only difference is that you load in the normal map in the base color in Character Creator instead of the albedo. I also saved out the textures from Character Creator, so I would have them in 8K. I think they're exporting only as 2 to 4K when you export the model to Blender later. Here I'm saving the wrapping points so I have them later for the next wrap. We will skip the refine mesh step. Because we are doing the wrapping process twice, it would be impossible to refine it manually and get it exactly the same twice. It's okay, we will sculpt it to match the scan later in Blender. I really prefer doing it that way anyway, because we can turn on subdivision surface when we're sculpting, so we really see where each vertex should be to match the shape really close. Here I'm importing the model with the CC Pipeline add-on and also importing the raw scan so I can start to sculpt in some details that went missing because we skipped the refine mesh step when we did the wrapping in Headshot. The hardest part in this process is to get the geometry for the mouth and eyes. The eyes are especially challenging because there's not enough geometry to model it exactly as the scan, so we just have to push the vertices around, try to pinch edge loops together, and find a balance. So it works with the deformation when we're animating also. This was the first pass. I did the same thing over again, but with subdivision level 2, which was the final resolution for me. Here you can clearly see the problem I have with the eyes, but most of it comes from the normal map. I also sculpted the eyes closed shape keys in Blender, probably 5 times, but it doesn't seem to export to Character Creator. I had to use the function correct eye blink in Character Creator to get the eyes closed, but then I loosed the shape which I sculpted in Blender. I still don't know how to do this. Please leave a comment if you know how to properly import sculpted shape keys back into Character Creator. I used iClone mostly for mocap cleanup, where I could see the knees colliding and where hands go through the body and so on. It's very important that you go through and fix these things before exporting the animation for cloth simulation. It can only be for one frame that the hand is too close to the body and your cloth simulation is ruined. Been there, done that. Sometimes you can get away by going to Blender and cut some fingers off, but it's better you do it at this stage so you don't have to think about it later. Here I'm deleting the frames I don't need and making the animation to start in the rest pose, so it's easier to fit the claws in Marvelous Designer later. I'm also adding one subdivision to the character mesh, so the garment has a little smoother surface to collide with. I exported a OBJ version of the character which I used in Marvelous Designer. When fitting the cloths, an A pose is better than a T pose, they say, but I think the rest position of these characters work just great, so I didn't bother making any separate poses this time. As long as the garment have some time to settle before the animation comes that you really need, it's all fine. If you're not going to film the first 100 frames, then who cares how the garment looks at that point? I used a particle distance of 5 for bigger pieces and 3 for smaller pieces, and the mesh style is triangles. But in this case, if you're just simulating a simple t-shirt, a particle distance of 3 is not a bad idea. The smaller the particle distance, the more wrinkles you get and the more realistic it will look. Also, make sure to lay out the UWS before exporting to Blender. When the simulation is done, you just export it as an Alembic file and import to your main Blender file. Here you can see the final model in Blender. I'm using a 35mm lens, and the camera is about 50 centimeters from the face. I just thought I'd show what kind of details you can expect from this workflow. Maybe not so good for real close-ups, but it will be enough for most of your shots, I think. And if you know how to sculpt the details yourself, you could make your own normal maps and get even more resolution. But I think it would be easier to work with ZBrush and face tools if you go that route. As I'm recording this, I see I have forgotten to fix the texture seam for the head and neck. Oh well, a little too late now. So my final conclusion is, if you don't want to wait for some magic AI tool that will do all the work for you, and you don't want to push those 2048 buttons in Unreal Engine, I think using Reallusion Suite in Blender is the easiest and fastest way to create characters today. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I will do my best to answer them.